Hi, I'm Bob. I have a problem. My problem is I have a bad job today. You've all come here to celebrate the success and the future of digital advertising. My job is to tell you that it's all fucked up. I think you can see my problem. Now, I know you're all nice people and you all work very hard and you're trying to do your best and you don't appreciate some old fuck getting up on stage and telling you that you're deluded. But I've been invited to tell you the truth as I see it, and that's what I'm going to do. So I want you to know I'm not one of those advertising haters. I spent 40 years in the agency business. I was the CEO of 3 agencies. I had a wonderful career, and I loved what I did. I'm also not one of those technology haters. Before I got into advertising, I was a science teacher. I love technology. But I know that technology can be used for good and for bad. And I think we've been using it badly. Now, to be honest, what I think and what you think don't really matter. It's the facts that matter. So I'm going to try my best to stick to the facts. Let's start at the beginning. The first rule is that the clicker doesn't work. Let's try this again. Okay, back we go. The first rule is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Richard Feynman said that. Feynman was one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. He was a math and physics genius who won the Nobel Prize, but he was always worried that he would fool himself into believing that he knew things that he didn't really know. I think Feynman's first rule is particularly relevant to us in the advertising and marketing industry. I think we're fooling ourselves. In fact, I think we're living in a fantasy land. It's a fantasy land in which consumers want to join the conversation about our brands. A fantasy land in which consumers are clamoring for more relevant advertising, in which consumers want to have relationships with brands and be part of a brand's tribe or community and co-create with brands. It's a fantasy land in which personalization has made advertising more appealing. And perhaps most disturbing, it's a fantasy land in which the convenience of marketers has become more important than the rights of citizens and the integrity of democratic institutions. About 10 years ago, we were treated to a glorious vision of the future for our industry. It was expected to be one of the most fruitful and productive decades in the history of advertising. We had amazing new digital tools and media that we never had before. The whole thing was intoxicating and certain to lead to all kinds of new opportunities. Our ability to personalize advertising and reach consumers one-to-one was sure to make advertising more relevant, more timely, and more likable. Our ability to listen to consumer conversations through social media and react quickly couldn't help but connect brands more closely with their customers. The opportunity for people to interact with media was certain to make advertising more engaging. And yet, by the near unanimous opinion of people inside and outside the advertising business, advertising has gotten worse, not better. It has gotten less effective, not more. Rather than creating advertising that's more relevant, more timely, and more likable, we're creating advertising that's more annoying, more disliked, and more avoided. A headline in the New York Times recently asserted, "The advertising industry has a problem. People hate ads." Regulators and governments are after us with a passion. They want to know what we're doing with data and whether we are acting illegally in collecting, trading, and selling personal private information about consumers. One study showed that of all forms of advertising, digital is the least trusted. Another study reported that the 8 types of advertising most disliked by consumers were all forms of online advertising. As a result, ad blocking apps are reportedly present in over 2 billion devices. Tens of billions of dollars are being stolen annually by online ad fraud. Consumers are becoming disgusted with our practice of tracking them, collecting personal private information about them, and selling it to anyone. Our industry has been in the middle of dozens of scandals. These scandals involve ad fraud, social media fraud, influencer fraud, click fraud, traffic fraud, attribution fraud, brand safety issues, and enormous data breaches and frightening abuse of personal data. As a result of all this, we are the least trusted industry in the world. Under the circumstances, it's hard for me to take seriously the opinions of the marketing and advertising experts who led us down this path. I think if Dr. Feynman were here today, he would say, we are fooling ourselves. I've spent a good deal of time thinking and writing about these problems, and I believe every one of them, to some degree, can be traced to the original sin of our industry, tracking. Tracking is the oxygen that gives life to our current model of online advertising and is a factor in every problem I have mentioned above. In my brief time today, I want to describe to you why our industry is in trouble and is the least trusted industry in the world. I believe it's corrupt, it's wasteful and secretive, and it's dangerous. Other than that, it's great. First, let's talk about corruption. Ad fraud may very well turn out to be the largest fraud in the history of the world. According to Advertising Age magazine and Spider Labs, an estimated 20% of online ad budgets globally are being snatched by fraudsters. If they are right, over $60 billion is being lost annually to online ad fraud. Juniper Research issued a statement recently that claimed online ad fraud would total $68 billion in 2022. To give you some perspective on that, worldwide ad fraud will be almost 3 times the size of all advertising expenditures of all kinds by all German companies combined. The truth is, nobody knows the exact extent of ad fraud, but there is no doubt about one thing: it's enormous. According to the World Federation of Advertisers, by 2022, ad fraud may be the second largest source of criminal revenue in the world after drug trafficking. Let me tell you about Professor Roberto Cavazos. He's a professor of economics at the University of Baltimore in the US. Dr. Cavazos' specialty is business fraud. He has studied business fraud for over 30 years. In 2019, he participated in a study called The Economic Cost of Bad Actors on the Internet. After the study, Professor Cavazos stated, "I have studied the economic costs of fraud in many sectors for decades, and I was left stunned by the scale of fraud in online advertising." Another participant in the study was the digital advertising director of the Financial Times in the UK, Anthony Hitchings. Hitchings had this to say: The scale of the fraud we found is jaw-dropping. The industry continues to waste marketing budgets on what is essentially organized crime. Last year, Professor Cavazos and his collaborators repeated their study of 2019 and were shocked by what they found. The report estimated that ad fraud increased by about 50% in 2020. And for those of you who are still under the delusion that your click rates and your CPMs are an indication of advertising performance, let me disabuse you of that idea. According to data security company Barracuda Networks, there is more traffic on the web from malicious bots than there is from human beings. In the first 9 months of 2019, Facebook had to remove 5.4 billion fake accounts from its platform. I'm sure you'll agree that Facebook is not famous for its measurement diligence. Let's try not to imagine how many fraudulent accounts they didn't discover. But the corruption of the online ad ecosystem goes deeper than fraud. In February, the data protection authorities of the EU ruled that the data consent pop-ups, what we call the transparency and consent framework, is total bullshit and illegal. They ruled that it does not keep personal data secure, as required by GDPR, does not properly collect personal consent, has not established a lawfully valid, legitimate interest in collecting information, fails to be transparent about what it does with people's data, fails to see to it that data is processed in accordance with GDPR regulations, and fails to respect the GDPR requirement of data protection by design. Other than that, it's fucking great. I also said our industry is wasteful and secretive. Let me tell you about a study conducted by the ISBA, the Incorporated Society of British Advertisers. The ISBA conducted a study to establish what component of an ad budget invested in programmatic advertising actually pays for advertising. 15 major advertisers, including Disney, Unilever, Nestle, participated in the study, as well as 8 agencies, 5 DSPs, 6 SSPs, and 12 publishers. Also participating in the project were Google and Amazon. The research studied some of the most sophisticated advertisers and suppliers, the premium end of the ecosystem. Here's what the study found. 49% of online ad money is being siphoned off by ad tech middlemen before it reaches publishers. Of the 49% that was siphoned off, about 1/3 of those dollars were completely untraceable. In some cases, the untraceable costs were as high as 83%. This means the money just evaporated into the programmatic black box without a trace. Only 12% of the dollars were completely transparent from end to end. An astounding 88% of dollars could not be traced from end to end. Using these findings, as well as research from Integral Ad Science on viewability, Advertising Age magazine on ad fraud, and Lumen Research on consumer behavior, I have developed what I call the programmatic poop funnel. You will see why I call it a poop funnel in a minute. Here's what happens to an advertising dollar as it passes through the programmatic ecosystem. We start with $1 to spend on programmatic advertising. On average, our agency gets 7% of this as commissions or fees. Now we have 93 cents. We pay on average 27 cents to technology, targeting, and data suppliers, including DSPs, SSPs, and other demand-side and supply-side middlemen, we now have 66 cents left. The next 15 cents just disappears. The ISBA could not find where this money went. They called it the unknown delta. It's money that just vanishes somewhere in the system. So now we have all the fees are paid, all the disappearing money has vanished, and we have 51 cents left to buy actual ads. So the programmatic buying system kicks in. Sadly, according to integral ad science, between 30 and 50% of the ads that are bought will not be viewable. Let's be conservative and say 30%. This leaves us with about 36 cents. Now we have to account for ad fraud. Let's use the number that was recently published by Advertising Age in the US, which was 20%. This leaves us with 29 cents worth of advertising that actually runs and is actually viewable. But the problem is that simply because an ad is viewable doesn't mean it gets viewed. In fact, Lumen Research tells us that only 9% of online ads are actually viewed by anyone. The bottom line is this: for every dollar you spend on programmatic ads, on average, you get 3 cents worth of actual ads viewed by actual people. This chart, based on information from the Association of National Advertisers in the US, proves the exact same thing in a different way. According to the ANA, of 200 million spent on programmatic ads, only 60 million ever reaches a consumer. 70% is lost to fees, fraud, viewability, and unknown deltas. When you factor in that only 9% of ads that reach a consumer are actually viewed, you come up with the identical result to the poop funnel. About 4 weeks ago, a pair of researchers stumbled across an incredible story. There's a publisher in the US called Gannett that publishes one of our most popular newspapers and news websites, USA Today. It also publishes hundreds of little community newspapers and websites. The researchers discovered that for 9 months, Gannett had been sending billions of ads to the wrong places. Advertisers who thought they were paying for advertising on USA Today were actually paying USA Today prices for ads that appeared in these tiny community newspapers and news sites. Billions of ads ran in the wrong places for 9 months without a single brand noticing that their ads weren't where they were supposed to be, a single agency knowing that the ads they placed were running in the wrong places, and a single fraud detection company or media auditing firm reporting that billions of ads went to the wrong places. You can't make this up. Programmatic advertising, it seems, is the blackest of black boxes. The third and by far most important reason I am averse to our current model of online advertising is that it's dangerous. Advertising's traditional job has been to impart information to people. Today, however, certain types of advertising have become equally about collecting information about people. I do not believe it's an exaggeration to say that a good deal of online advertising can be viewed as spyware that only looks like advertising. It's also not an exaggeration to say that it has more monetary value for the information it collects than the information it delivers. Perhaps the most dangerous thing that the advertising industry has created in the past decade is the surveillance economy and the political consequences that the surveillance economy has engendered. In 2017, I wrote a book entitled Bad Men: How Advertising Went from a Minor Annoyance to a Major Menace. In that book, I wrote that we know the dangers that accrue when governments know everything about us, follow us everywhere, read our communications, and know who we talk to and what we talk about. We know this because of the horrors we've seen of governmental organs like the Stasi and the KGB. But we don't know what can occur when marketers know everything about us, when they follow us everywhere, when they read our communications and know who we talk to and what we talk about. I wrote that 5 years ago. Sadly, today, we are starting to understand what those dangers are. There's nothing mysterious about the role that ad tech has played in the radicalization of politics in my country, the United States, and the horrifying violent events last year in Washington, D.C. There's a clear line connecting online tracking and political radicalization. As we move about the web, trackers relentlessly gather information about where we go, what we look at, and what we interact with. This information is then fed into algorithms, which are formulas that are derived from our behavior and to some extent describe our personalities. The algorithms are used by platforms. I'm going to use Facebook as an example to decide what to show us. My Facebook page is completely different from yours. It's based on the algorithms that describe me. My page shows me content that's likely to be more engaging to me. Your page shows you content that's likely to be more engaging to you. The purpose of these algorithms is primarily to keep us within the walls of the publisher or the platform. The more time I spend inside their walls, the more money the platform can realize from selling space on my page to advertisers. To do this, the platforms feed me ever more engaging content. Experience has taught the algorithms that the more juicy the material, the more likely they are to keep me inside the walls. Consequently, the algorithms feed me incrementally more lurid notions of my own predispositions and drive me deeper into rabbit holes where I may encounter people whose ideas are more extreme versions of my own. In May of last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that after the US presidential election of 2016, a team of Facebook executives undertook an internal study to understand how these practices shaped the behavior of Facebook users. The study concluded that algorithms they used to gain user attention and increase time on their platform were driving a wedge into US society. According to the report, 64%, that's almost 2/3, of all extremist group joins are due to our recommendation tools. Our recommendation systems grow the problem, unquote. This report revealed the truth. It unambiguously described the way social algorithms direct people into extremist groups of all kinds, and it's all driven by tracking. Professor Haney Farid, an expert at the University of California, Berkeley, has said they didn't set out to fuel misinformation and hate and divisiveness, but that's what the algorithms learned. On July 1st, 2021, Facebook's VP of Global Affairs and Communications, Nick Clegg, said, "I want to be unambiguous. Facebook does not profit from hate." Well, I would also like to be unambiguous. Bullshit. But there's more to this story. While social media and other and other online publishers have taken the heat. It's been largely unrecognized by the public and by policymakers that it's for the sole benefit of us in the advertising and marketing industry that they do this squalid work. We are the hidden hand that guides and finances their dangerous practices. The relentless collection of online data that feeds the toxic algorithms that are tearing societies apart is being effectuated on behalf of the advertising and marketing industry. There's nothing ambiguous about this. According to a study reported by the British Parliament, by the time a child in Europe is 13 years old, the ad tech industry has 72 million data points on that child. How in the world is this acceptable? And how do we in the advertising industry justify the damage we're doing? It's through a series of disingenuous assertions about the supposed benefits of tracking. The first and most dishonest is the claim that the free internet is reliant on surveillance for its revenue model. This is not true. TV, radio, press, outdoor, in fact, all media did very well for decades without spying on individuals. There is no reason why online advertising can't be viable without spying on us. Is the free internet reliant on advertising? Yes. Is it reliant on tracking? No. Next, we hear that tracking is necessary because consumers want more relevant advertising. This is more bullshit. Last year, Apple changed its operating system to give its iPhone and iPad users the choice of being tracked or not. As of last month, fewer than 20% of the people in the US chose to be tracked and get more relevant advertising. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment and pretend that all this baloney about marketers' need for spying on the public is essential to their business. The question I would pose is this: since when did the convenience of marketers become more important than the rights of individuals and the integrity of democratic institutions? Every one of the problems I've discussed this morning, to some degree, can be traced to the one sin of our industry: tracking. Online advertising supports many wonderful things that we all enjoy and appreciate. It gives us free entertainment and free information. It allows us to meet and become friends with people we would otherwise never meet. It allows us to be in contact with friends and relatives throughout the world. It provides enormous economic benefits to many, including many people in this theater today. Its potential for good is enormous, but its current model of tracking and surveillance is dangerous, wasteful, and corrupting. I understand that much of what I've said this morning has been unpleasant. I had a wonderful advertising career, and as an old guy who has seen a lot, I believe I have an obligation to be responsible in what I say to you. I want to assure you that my only goal is to use whatever persuasive powers I have to make the advertising industry more responsible, more trustworthy, and more sustainable. Let's summarize. I believe we've had a lost decade. We've allowed ourselves to be deluded by the assertions of articulate people masquerading as advertising and marketing experts. We have lost any healthy degree of skepticism. It has cost us dearly. The theme of this conference is the future of online advertising. If online advertising is to have a healthy future, we would be wise to rethink what we are doing. to keep open minds and admit that a great deal of what we've done for the past several years has been unhealthy for our industry and unhealthy for society. My advice to you is do not listen to big mouths like me. Don't just accept the assertions of big shots. Don't rely on the cliches of our industry. Give yourself the wonderful freedom of skepticism. Question everything. Demand the facts or dig them out for yourself. Nobody is smarter than the facts. With third-party cookies hopefully going away, we're at a crossroad. We can find new ways to abuse our privileges and abuse the rights of citizens, or we can find a cleaner way to conduct our business. I hope we will choose to clean up our act. Thank you very much.
Is this on? Thank you, Bob. As always, it's appreciated that you come here to scare the shit out of the industry with your truths. I'm going to ask the audience to challenge Bob, if you like, on some of his assertions. Ask him a question, and do dig into what he's saying. I'm going to start with a question, but please do put your hand up and go and request the microphone, because I'm coming to you next. But the first thing I want to ask you is that you've been talking about this for years, and if you follow Bob's blog, you'll see this sort of stuff he has been saying for a very long period of time. And it hasn't changed. But what has changed, if you like, is digital ad spend. The latest IAB figures from the UK is that ad spend is up 41%. And that spend, by a vast majority, is going to the biggest players, the Googles and Facebooks that you've been mentioning. What do you think about that? Like, are clients listening to you?
No.
Why?
Very few people are listening to me. I've been in and around the advertising business for almost 50 years. And if you ask me to explain the behavior of advertisers and marketers, in many cases, I'm at a total loss. And this is another perfect example of it. I just cannot understand why this has not become a much bigger issue in the advertising and marketing industry.
No, nor do I. And the one thing that I always ask, I always follow up, and or I get told this. They say to me, marketers are not stupid.
Oh.
They wouldn't be doing this if it didn't work. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I've been around marketers for almost 50 years. There are plenty of very stupid marketers. Trust me.
Okay.
There are smart ones. I'm not saying they're all stupid.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of stupid ones.
Okay. So would anyone like to ask Bob a question? It's very difficult for me to see up here because of lights in my eyes. So does someone have a microphone?
Yeah,
someone brave enough?
Yeah.
Ah, brilliant.
I got a question. Bob, it was wonderful what you just told us. I'm the author of the German version of this Seth Godin's book, Permission Marketing, 25 years ago. Why are you so negative? There's a positive aspect. What do you think about real first-party data? Data which I give you because I like to give it to you, and I know that I give it to you.
I have no problem with first-party, with shallow first-party data that is given freely and with informed consent.
That's it.
But do you think consumers actually know what we're doing with their data?
No.
And the power of especially when you look at the ad tech to radicalization, if they understood the real power of what we're capable of with the ad tech systems that we've got combined with social media, do you think that they would give you that consent?
Some would, most wouldn't. I think that's one of the biggest problems is that consumers don't understand what they're agreeing to. And that's why the whole, TCF thing is ridiculous. Nobody understands those things.
Who really reads on them when you click on them anyway? You're just clicking on them quickly so you can get to the page that you want or
most people just click allow all so they're not bothered. And, the EU, the enforcement people have ruled that that's illegal and wrong. So we'll see what happens.
So it's actually a good segue, that question, because we have obviously focused on the nefarious and the naughty of digital. Tell us, though, what do you like about digital advertising?
Well, I think I said it. There's a lot about online, the whole online ecosystem that's wonderful. You know, we get incredible amount of free entertainment and services, and if the companies would just stop spying on us, which they don't have to do, they can do okay with advertising without the spy network, without the surveillance. I would have no trouble with online advertising. It's the tracking that bothers me. And tracking, it sounds simple, it's one word, but it's responsible for a whole bunch of bad, messy things that we shouldn't have to put up with.
Okay. Anyone else from the audience? I can't see if anyone's got the microphone. While we're doing that, you mentioned the programmatic value chain and obviously iffy surveillance techniques.
Yeah.
If you could change sort of one thing within that funnel, let's say, like just magically sort of erase one thing from that today, what would that be?
I don't know. That's a too difficult question for an idiot like me. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a software engineer. I don't know what's going on under the hood. I only know what the people who know these things that I trust tell me, like the ISBA gives, and I trust what they have to say. I don't know what it is within there that makes 15% just evaporate, and that's at the highest end of the programmatic channel. So I can't really answer that question.
They're doing another study, actually. It's this PwC study, wasn't it? They're doing it actually just in the US market as well. So it's going to be interesting to see that.
Yeah, the ANA is doing it in the US.
I think the unknown delta would be the one to get rid of, personally, because
that's probably a good one.
We don't know where that's going.
But you know, the whole thing is wrong. If we're spending 50% of a dollar for guidance, which is essentially what all the data information that we get. Would you spend, if you had $100,000 to invest, would you give your broker $50,000 to give you advice on what to invest in? I wouldn't. A broker gets 1.5%, not 50%, but we're essentially giving 50% for advice on what to invest our monies in online. I don't see how that makes sense.
I don't think that appears in these glossy programmatic reports that agencies ship to clients. That's the only excuse I can give. Any other questions from the audience?
Right here.
Oh, excellent. We can't see you, so you have to just like wave.
Okay, just hear me out. Well, Bob, thank you so much. I'm right across your stage, and I don't think you can hear me or see me, but right here. Thank you. I'm Sue from Freeman, and I'm a marketer for 20 years and work for bigger brands as well as smaller brands. And I'm very, very fascinated by your conversation right now. You're poking the bear, and I'm very, very curious to understand that we live in a world of commerce, which means that we need services, we need products for our day-to-day life. And let's say I go to a Mercedes website, check out the car, I'm interested, but I'm not necessarily expected to be tracked, but I have an intent to purchase. And if I am shown ads of a specific model that I might have visited a couple more times in some other sites, is it going to be offensive to me, or is it going to be interesting to me that may actually make me want to purchase the product that I intended to look at? So I'm not talking about tracking here necessarily, but I'm talking about marketing in general is about a science of offering something that's of relevance and interest to the audience. So how would you advise going forward, what should marketers do to make sure that people are offered what they're looking for?
There are all kinds of ways for marketers to understand targeting without having to spy on people. Marketers have done this for decades very successfully. And there are, the day that tracking is eventually found to be illegal and no longer done, I guarantee you Facebook and Google and all the other people will come up with methodologies for identifying audiences that don't rely on behavioral tracking and are every bit as effective as what they're doing now. And they'll be promoting them to you. This is even better than what we used to do. I guarantee that will happen someday. And tracking is not a reasonable, the fact that it makes marketing more convenient is not a good enough excuse for the damage it's doing. I guess that's what I'm saying.
And you have to question the effectiveness of it as well. We're not saying, or I share Bob's views on some of this, that that digital is not bad. There's some very effective,
of course,
bottom of the funnel sort of activities that you can use with digital. But I think one of the big arguments that sort of Bob makes is that they spend too much money on it. There's a reason why you enter the Mercedes website in the first place, and it's probably not because of a pop-up ad or a banner ad or any other the bottom of the funnel sort of digital marketing techniques. Just to wrap up, because I know we're lacking time here, I'm wondering, what is the fix to this? Do you think government intervention, or can we trust the industry to sort of self-regulate?
No, the industry is too irresponsible. You know, we've been trusting the industry for 15 years or so to do something, and they don't. Unfortunately, we can't trust governments either. They pass laws, but they don't enforce them. Hopefully, there will be some enforcement. The problem is not the laws. The laws are there in most cases. The problem is there has been no enforcement of the laws, and there's there's just been a new law passed on Saturday, DMS it's called, I think, and we'll see. You know, it promises to fix some of these problems, but unless they enforce it, the big tech companies don't really care much. They pay their fines and they move on and keep doing what they've been doing.
Well, maybe change will be dictated by people in this room and clients' budgets. Maybe that's the only way it can be enforced. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time. I'd like you to give a massive round of applause for Bob Hoffman coming here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob.